There are 8 of these, and the first one that we're going to talk about is holistic approaches. So you'll see that we have 8 practices: holistic approaches, responsiveness to children, play, intentional teaching, environments, cultural competence, continuity, and assessment. But let's get on with today. So, when early childhood educators take an holistic approach, they pay attention to children's physical, personal, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being, as well as cognitive aspects of learning. As an educator, you will see children's learning as integrated and interconnected. You will recognize connections to children, families, and communities, and you will see learning as a social activity. You will value collaborative learning, and you will value community participation. Educators will also foster the children's capacity to understand, connect, respect the natural environment. This is very important when we talk about an holistic approach. Holistic learning focuses on connections to the natural world and the interdependence between people, plants, animals, and the land. Now, here are some practical ideas for programming and planning with an holistic approach. The EYLF needs to work in your context, but you may like to consider the following. So, when you're programming and planning, there is no particular way to program and plan. To me, I find this very freeing because you're responding to the children and the partnerships that are in your early learning setting. And you can make something work for you and your children. So programming and planning responds to individual children and their needs, and each group of children is different. Very important to emphasize that. There's no right and wrong way, but it's wonderful if you work on a programming cycle that is responsive and fluid and moving. When you observe children, when you assess them, your program is moving and responding to those factors. So here, programming is one of those things. It is very individual. But here, when we're talking about holistic programming, you're looking at responding to the social, emotional, gross motor, fine motor, creative aspects, cognitive, language. You're looking at personal and cultural aspects, and you're also providing space to evaluate and review. Now this page here, you can set it out however you want. That's the great thing about the EYLF. But there are certain things that are present. So you've got, evaluation and review. That's very important that you're reflecting in your program. So it's very important that you've got an assessment part to your program. So you look at what you're assessing. You look at what you're monitoring. Then on the right-hand side, I've got content and interest. Now, content and interest can come through what the teacher wants, but it can come from the families and the partnerships within the community. But it can also come when you watch children play. What are they engaging in? What are they talking about? And, they might, be really fascinated or interested in, fairies and cupcakes as an example. Well, you can include that in your planning. They might be really interested in dinosaurs. They might be really interested in dressing up as things when they grow up. So I've just given a few examples. But you can include those interests in your programming. You could do a 1-week plan or a 2-week plan. You can look at the concepts that you're bringing in and the learning area outcomes, which might come from the early years learning framework, guidelines, which is spelt wrong. I'm sorry about that. It could come from your ACARA outcomes. And I'm just going to go to the next page, because within planning, just a few things you can consider. You've got long-term planning, which look at your outcomes for the year. Then you've got medium-term planning, which includes your domains, your integration, experiences, assessment, content, skills, concepts, resources, and reflection. And then you've got your short-term, day-to-day specifics of planning. So the great thing about the EYLF is you can talk with your team and figure out a format that's going to work for you, but make sure that you are planning on a regular basis, and your planning and your programming is really driven in response to the needs of the children. It's in response to your assessment, and it's in response to observation. It's listening to the community, and it's regarding the partnerships that you've got with families as well. So there's lots to get your head around, but there's just some thoughts when you're thinking about holistic planning and a holistic approach. So the other thing that's really important is helping children to understand that they connect and respect the natural environment. So here are just some ideas. You could bring plants and nature into your setting to draw, touch and create. And you can get children to help in deciding what plants to have and involve children in maintaining the plants. So it's keeping that hands-on element, and it's having a focus. When you're looking at the whole child, you look at how they interrelate with nature and the world around them, and you're bearing this in mind when you program and when you plan. Some other ideas to do this. Now, if you're not a gardener, and I don't claim to be a fantastic gardener, but I've started small within my early learning setting with what I can manage. And that's the thing with the EYLF and reflecting on where you are. If you're not a gardener and, into plants and that, you've got to start, because that's something that, you've got to draw into your early learning setting. So now I started very, very small. So I hope you like this next idea. I got all the children to bring in a succulent or a cactus. Now, partly because they're inexpensive, but definitely because they're very hard to kill. So I set up a table where everybody brought in their own little plant. I don't know if you can see it, but in the picture there's a pop stick with their name on. And we just looked at our plants, we watered them a bit, and we used that table as an observation table where we would draw our drawings, and it was quite wonderful just to bring those in. So if you're like me and you're not a gardener, a fantastic gardener just yet, there's a little idea. The other thing that you can do is create interest tables with nature and natural elements. So there we go, just a little thing that we did. And then grow a vegetable garden, and then cook and bake using your produce. So that can be a work in progress as well. Another aspect to holistic learning is starting a recycling program, or a way that you can teach children about sustainability. And there's just a little idea that I've seen and caught. It's collecting bottle tops of all colours and lids and that type of thing, and then making something that can go into your early learning setting with those elements. Very, very fun, and the children learn a lot by doing it.